Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 59, What Smiles in the White World. That is that, this is this. Ending their conversation with that, Subaru and Julius both experienced a strange sensation. The truth was, he did not know if he had managed to reach close to Julius' convoluted heart. What he ended up thinking of was whether there could have been better words, a more perfect way of action, a further beautiful way of connection. A way of action which could have overwritten this absurd reality, instead of reaching a reckless conclusion like that is that, this is this. Julius, but, it is very befitting of you. For better or worse, you see. Subaru, is that so? You know, how much of what befits me overlaps with the me until yesterday, actually quite concerns with my present self's identity. Julius, in terms of the establishment of oneself, my former self was very much greatly shaken as well. As one who's already tasted the same crisis, let me give you some advice. That is that, this is this. Subaru, oh shut up. Subaru howled in response to Julius' ridicule of their earlier banter. Julius shrugged his shoulders at his objection and seemingly had an air of composure. Indeed, it appeared he seriously did manage to make his heart stand up once again a bit. Although they had been words quite immature and maladroit, it was all thanks to the listener being apt. Regardless, whilst the two of them interacted in that fashion. Shala, Master Sama, are you done? Subaru? Shala? Behind them, peeking from the top of the staircase leading to the third layer was Shala, calling out to him. With her black braid dangling down as she peered down to the lower floor, she was looking at them with her voluptuous chest touching the floor. Subaru, why so well behaved? Were you that kind of a character? Shala, well, when Master Sama's talking to someone one-to-one then that's when it's some real solid talk, isn't it? So I was told before to stay away cause I break the mood if I'm there, so I'm just abiding by that. Alright, Master Sama has forgotten everything. Subaru, solid talk and breaking the mood at. Subaru furrowed his eyebrows in response to Shala, who was laughing earnestly and openly. Seeing Subaru, Shala then jumped and descended from the staircase in one breath. Jumping over 200 stairs, Shala made a silent landing onto the floor. She then proceeded to stand beside Subaru and grab his arm into her chest. Subaru, I've told you several times already, stop doing this kind of stuff. Emilia-chan will have a misunderstanding. Julius, Emilia-sama, huh? Subaru, don't me. There's just that small possibility, you know. Even if it's a possibility as absurd as finding a needle in a desert, it's still a possibility. Saying so, Subaru forcefully unfastened Shala's arms. Upon that gesture, Shala said ah and pouted with a dissatisfied expression. Shala, Master Sama is so mean. Treating me like this when I'm thirsting for warmth. Subaru, if you're thirsting for warmth then go hug Meili or Beatrice. Both of their body temperatures are pretty warm since they're kids. Beatrice, she's pretty warm for being 400 years old. Bringing that to light by connecting the shocking truth had been confirmed earlier, and the truth he had ascertained several times, Subaru was shaken by Beatrice's little girl energy. The conclusion, she'll always remain a little girl no matter how many years she may live. Shala, boo. I won't report anything to the cold Master Sama. It's the disciple strike. The manager is to listen to the voice of the workers. Subaru, geez, I get it. I'll positively handle and improve the labor conditions, so let us hear your report. Did something happen? Shala, it's suspicious whether you'll really improve them. But, I'm an obedient, cute disciple so I'll answer. Reed's book has been found. Subaru, huh? So articulated Shala as she distanced her braid and shoulders away. Subaru widened his eyes upon how unexpected those words were. Julius also widened his eyes just as much. Julius, Miss Shala, what did you say just now? Shala, like I said, I'm saying Reed's book has been found. Something like the book which has that scum's name on it. I personally think it'd be better to just burn it and throw it away. You think so too, right, Master Sama? Subaru, ha. Shala, ha. Master Sama, is that a laugh? Lowering her hips, Shala looked at Subaru's face from below. Looking back into her black eyes teeming with rustic simplicity and naivete, Subaru opened his mouth. And shouted. Subaru, that should be the first thing you say. Emilia, Look, Subaru. We found Reed's book. Said Emilia with a wide smile and voice like the chime of a silver bell, noticing Subaru climb up the staircase. What she pointed toward with her hand was the bulky book Ram was carrying in her arms. It seems that was Reed's Book of the Dead. It got found rather quickly. The library, filled with a vast amount of books no matter where one looked it was unknown from which age this existed, but if this recorded all of the dead in this world, then the amount of books was rather suitable. Subaru, good job finding the book we aimed for amongst all of this. While I was busy with Julius counseling. Therapy? Aromatherapy? Something like that. Emilia, counseling. I don't really get it, but isn't it quite something? But I'm not the one who found it. Amelia, with her chest puffed up, stated the achievement wasn't hers. What that implied was immediately made clear by her subsequent actions. Amelia gently pushed forward the dark blue-haired young girl, hugging her waist. Amelia, Meili is the one who found it. Isn't it meritorious? Subaru, who says meritorious in this day and age? But that aside, so Meili found it. That's certainly meritorious. Good work. Accepting Amelia's words, Subaru then automatically commended the achiever as well. With her arms around Amelia's slim waist, and whilst she was being caressed by her, Meili averted her eyes out of embarrassment in response to Subaru's words. Meili, and not really. It was a book that just caught my eye, and I just happened to mention it. It got found just slightly quickly, so I don't think it's anything great. Subaru, don't be stupid. You can brag about what you did well just fine. Really good, Meili. You've nullified the negative of trying to push me back to zero right away, huh? Meili, by something this simple. Meili widened her eyes in surprise, as Subaru overbearingly brushed her head. Meili didn't take a liking to it, saying my hair will get disheveled, but that simply made Subaru relax his cheeks. Subaru, it's fine. It was just an attempt anyway, and you compensated for it with a big achievement, let's agree to that. Subaru, so, Reed's book. Nobody has seen it yet, right? Meili tried saying something in response to the smiling Subaru, but remained with her mouth closed. Whilst keeping Meili's faltering within his vision, Subaru turned his attention to the book for the moment, which was the root subject. The book Ram was carrying the patterns drawn at its back cover. Those were characters Subaru couldn't read. Neither did it possess a bizarre sensation like giving Reed's vibes upon a single glance. Subaru, no matter how unconventional the actual person himself may be, the book recording that doesn't resound that, huh? Ram, if the binding was meaninglessly over the top, or if the title aggressively self-asserted itself, then it would have been easier to find. It's helpful that Meili made up for that and found it. Subaru, see, look, Meili. Even Ram is complimenting you. That one and only Ram. This Ram. You really can be glad about it. Gay. Ram, kindly shut up. With his side gouged by her fingers, Subaru collapsed in agony at the same spot. And after quietening Subaru, Ram lightly shook the book in her arms. Ram, there's what happened with Barossa. It'd be a disaster if one did something rash and lost memories like Barossa did. That is why, it's been shown to nobody. Subaru, we haven't confirmed if the reason for my memory loss is that book. Ram, ha. The comment, which didn't convince him alone, was slashed down by Ram's laugh. The truth was, it was nearly impossible that his memory loss and the Book of the Dead were unrelated. Even if they found the book they aimed to, it was only natural that they would have disputes over how it was to be utilized. Beatrice, so, the book has properly been found, in fact. What remains is using it, I suppose. So remarked Beatrice, having the same train of thought as Subaru. Receiving her words, everyone's joy for having discovered the book was then coated with nervousness. This one book was capable of causing memory loss should its usage be mistaken. That was the same as gulping down a medicine of unknown identity. Reluctance was natural. Echidna, so should we discuss and conjecture the dangers? Subaru, discuss and conjecture the dangers. Is that even possible, Echidna? Echidna, conjecture is possible only on the basis of events that have already occurred in bits and pieces of information though. Saying so, Echidna raised her hands and shrugged. Afterwards she raised her index finger. Echidna, first, the riskiness of the Book of the Dead. Just as what Natsuki-kuen's present condition indicates, there exists the possibility of losing one's memories. From what Natsuki-kuen said, the memories which spill and fall out are rather in fragments. Though I suppose in this case it would be better to call the remaining memories to be in fragments? The portion which spilled over and the portion which remained, the amount of the former was overwhelmingly greater. What Echidna said was correct. However, what slightly deviated from the truth here was that Subaru used memory loss and its remnants as camouflage in order to hide return by death. The truth was, around the first time when he had lost memories in its truest sense, Subaru had lost memories of everything after arriving in the different world rather. Henceforth, it would be better to think that the amnesia made no pardons. Right now, the only actual precedent set was that Subaru merely did not lose himself due to the memory loss. Had he lost not only episodic memories, but also his own self? When he thought about that, he shuddered. At the same time, why did he not lose memories of just the different world but those of the former world as well? That question also posed within Subaru's mind. Echidna, the reason for the amnesia is also possible to speculate about. First, memories are erased as indemnification for reading the Book of the Dead. That is difficult to consider, keeping in mind the differences in cases of Natsuki-kuen and Julius, who've both read the books. Beatrice, don't really want to think about it, but There is also the possibility of losing a small bit of memories, in fact. If what's being read and the memories that get erased are proportional in amount, then that induction would also be logical, I suppose. Julius, I agree. In other words, the reason why Subaru's and my circumstances are different is due to the difference in the amount of books read. It would coincide with the Subaru whom Miss Maylie had witnessed last night. Beatrice objected to Echidna's inference, which was then affirmed by Julius. Listening to his intelligent party members' converse, Subaru nodded in response. Subaru, in other words, the voluminousness of the books read possibly has something to do with the loss of memories? Echidna, it means that would also be a possible way of interpretation. In the case of this inference being affirmed, the ones who should force their eyes through Reed's Book of the Dead are us, who haven't read a single Book of the Dead before. It may be dangerous for Natsuki-kun and Julius, who've already read them. The view that the one with experience should read it, and the view that one without experience should read it ran counter to each other. Both sides were logical, and it was difficult to concede either side is wrong. However, what made him curious then was, Subaru, then, what about me, who's already lost memories once? If the condition for losing memories is to accumulate information from books of the dead, have I been reset? Or not? Ram, that is quite a grave issue. If Barusa's memories are lost again, and everything has to be explained again. Even the thought of it makes one shudder. Subaru, your language made me shudder too. Emilia, I'm also really worried about that. I don't want Subaru to forget all sorts of things again. Emilia and Ram affirmed the concern Subaru wielded in their own ways. In all honesty, the questions had no end to them. It was unknown whether reading a large number of people made them disappear, or if a smaller number of people was dangerous. He couldn't say it openly, but Subaru also possessed the memories of reading Maylie's Book of the Dead in the previous loop. Would that count as having read one book this time as well? Maylie, what? Does that look in your eye say that you're thinking of just making me read as expiation? That hurt. Subaru, there's no way. If you say stupid stuff, you'll be grounded. Maylie, it's abuse. Isn't the way you treat prisoners even more mean than back when we were in the mansion, huh? Subaru scolded in response to Maylie's ill-humored joke, which she remarked upon accepting his gaze. Subsequently, Maylie pouted her cheeks, grabbed Shala and Emilia's hands, and hid behind them. Though quite self-interested, that is how cute children should be. Subaru smiled wryly before Maylie's attitude, and then turned back towards Echidna. Subaru, so, do you have any other ideas? Echidna, let's see. Whether we, who have the leeway of a single book more than Julius, are to read it, or if Julius, who's already experienced it, is to read it, or if Natsuki-kun, whose memories have already possibly overflown once, is to read it. Subaru, can I make a comment really convenient to me? I think it's best if I read it. Beatrice, Subaru. Echidna brought up the list of candidates, and Beatrice grasped Subaru's hand when he responded. Subaru winked whilst looking into her gaze, tinted with a deeper color of concern than one of unease. Beatrice, this is no time for bad jokes, in fact. His own memories, Subaru will. Subaru, no, I don't want to lose my memories, of course. But this is the appropriate call in terms of risk management. No matter how you look at it, I'm the person with the least possibility of putting everyone in danger by losing memories. I'm the weakest one out of all of us, after all. Well, he did want to say he wasn't weaker than at least Maylie, but it was a well-known fact that he couldn't win against any of the others. He would be easy to subdue, and since he had already lost memories once, the way to cope with it would also be simple. The issue was, Subaru had already accumulated memories of 4 laps which mustn't be forgotten. That is why. Subaru, I'm not throwing down the gauntlet with the intention to forget. But we're a team. Everyone needs to bear some sort of responsibility for the sake of everyone. Subaru, Julius is charged with fighting, Echidna is charged with intellect, Ram is charged with having a wicked tongue, Maylie is charged with being cute, Beatrice is charged with being cute, Emilia-chan is charged with being the beautiful heroine, Shala is charged with photogenic scenes. If you think about it that way, then I should be the one charged with this. Beatrice, for some reason, it feels like there are way too many pointless positions. Shala, not at all. When the plot takes a turn for the worse, romantic scenes are important. If it's for art and Master Sama, then I'll take off my clothes. Subaru, no, if you take any more clothes off then I'll pull out, so you don't have to do your best. Shala, the latter slipped. Everyone here knew that this was Subaru's way of comforting them. In response to Subaru's speech and conduct, whilst he presumed upon that, the first one to sigh was Beatrice, who still had his hand gripped. She took a deep inhale, and then turned her eyes towards Subaru. Beatrice, geez, if things take this sort of a turn then Subaru will never budge no matter what, I suppose. That part of you hasn't changed even after losing memories, in fact. That is already a well-known fact seeing what happened with Maylie, I suppose. Subaru, but you love me with all my qualities, right? I'll blush. Beatrice, don't get cocky, in fact. He spanked the blushing Beatrice around her hips. However, her words did not possess the nuance of denial. And it seems the same went for the rest of the members as well. Ram, you're getting mashed if you forget your promise with Ram. Subaru, what's that, right when I was having such a nice monologue? Ram, what indeed? Snorting her nose, Ram then turned the book she held in her arms to Subaru. Profoundly tasting the heavy sensation of the book with his arms, Subaru smiled bitterly. Amelia, even if we tell you to not be reckless, Subaru will still be reckless, isn't it? I think that part of you is really unfair. I'm always worried. Subaru, I have nothing to say but apologize for that. But, just as how much Amelia-chan is worried, I'm worried about you the same amount. What do you think? Would that be presumptuous? Amelia, it makes me happy that Subaru would think that way. That's why, I feel really convoluted. Come back no matter what. Even if we make a promise like that, Subaru will break it anyways, so I won't make that promise. Subaru, the fact that the me until yesterday couldn't be trusted this much instead gets my heart throbbing. I wonder what the hell did he do? Shrugging his shoulders upon Amelia's pleasant words, Subaru asked, am I right, to those surrounding them. And upon that, he noticed everyone but Shala and Meili had all averted their eyes away. Regardless of Beatrice and Ram, who were in the same camp as him, it seemed that Subaru's breaking of promises had reached even Julius and Echidna. Regardless. Subaru, I'll read it, no objections, right? Echidna, in the end, I am unable to come up with any inference or suspicion. Though if possible, I wanted to opt for the eyes, which would be the least endangered out of everyone here. Echidna apologetically lowered her eyebrows before Subaru, who was lightly holding the book. What she said was true, and the fact that she had been concerned for everyone was unquestionable. That is why Subaru was able to respond earnestly to her saying, don't let it bother you. Subaru, well, for now, I'll dive into it. If I lose my memories, then put me down with ice and explain everything to me gently. Beatrice, nobody is going to perform such a violent act, in fact. Subaru, I know. Because you're kind. Caressing the perturbed Beatrice on her head, he gently pressed her white forehead. Beatrice pouted with a discontent expression and took a single step backward. And with everyone's gazes focusing on him, Subaru sat down on the spot, crossed his legs, and took an immensely deep inhale. Atop his knees, read Estria's Book of the Dead. Upon concentrating on it, there definitely was certain ominousness emanating from the book. A similar sensation also existed back when he read Meili's, her Book of the Dead, but the sense of intimidation this book had was far greater. Perhaps what the reader could feel changed depending on whose book was taken. Just what kind of a life would he be made to read, he pondered. And would Subaru's memories be able to withstand it? Putting his hand on the front cover of the book, Subaru, for merely once, looked towards everyone who was watching over him. Beatrice, Meili, Ram, Echidna, Julius, Shala were observing him. And Amelia, Subaru. Subaru, well then, I'll be leaving. I may get late coming back, so you can go ahead and have dinner. Amelia, stupid. Seen off by that smile of Amelia's, Subaru turned the front cover of the Book of the Dead over. Upon that instant, the characters written on the book glowed, and Subaru was made to undergo a hallucination as though information was being smited into his brain via his eyeballs. And in but a moment, his consciousness was taken in towards the book. His consciousness was detached from the library and propelled towards darkness. What he felt when he read Meili's Book of the Dead had become quite amorphous now. The spectacles he had witnessed, the life she had walked, the paths she had trodden were distinct in their own ways. However, his memories were of witnessing those spectacles, tangibly speaking, becoming one with whose name was the title of the Book of the Dead, and being made to personally experience those subjective thoughts, sights. To summarize, the journey of treading through the content of the Book of the Dead was to assimilate into that person. In those moments, the Natsuki Subaru witnessing the contents of the book was Meili portrait. That is precisely why it could be believed that queer self-consciousness which bore the presence of Meili, as me, constantly shadowed Subaru's consciousness from close vicinity. If that was the potency of the Book of the Dead, then right now, what Subaru was supposed to be laying his eyes on was the life of Reed Estria, his subjective world within his incomprehensible thinking. What he thought, what he liked, what he disliked, what he loved, what he despised, what he achieved. He was supposed to become one with the philosophy of Reed Estria and be shown his life. Thus, Subaru noticed the abnormality at once. The place where he was, right now, definitely was not that past of Reed Estria's. Subaru what? He stood in a white location. His environs, unduly spacious, white, ambiguous space of no visible end stretched across, and without knowing where his self was, Subaru was exhausted of reason. He could see his hands. He could see his legs. Upon turning his neck, his torso and hips were also there. In other words, Subaru's body was here. This did not coincide with the phenomena that had occurred in Meili's Book of the Dead. Unable to concur, he was thrown into an unnatural circumstance. From what he could see, Subaru's attire was the same as when he decided to read the Book of the Dead. Whether that was due to Subaru recognizing that he would look like this in this present condition, or the will of something else, like the work of the library's will, hence reconstructing Subaru in that form. He did not want to consider that the moment he read the book, his entire body got captured within. Well well. Oh Oni-san, you've come here again? Subaru, hook. Suddenly, Subaru's shoulders sprang up upon hearing a voice which wasn't his own, but that of another. The voice came from behind. Subaru spontaneously jumped ahead and subsequently turned around, making a circle, remaining vigilant. In response to Subaru's spasmodic conduct, the personage behind rounded eyes. Subaru, who are you? Looking at that person, Subaru whispered openly, with perplexity and bafflement. That was his encounter with someone, completely unexpected and unknown to Subaru. The one standing there was a young girl Subaru had never seen before. Pale-toned, with hair lengthy, truly lengthy, like transparent gold threads. They spanned across the white floor, submerging underfoot her standing self like a sea of golden. Large, round, blue eyes, limbs like transparent porcelain. On the other hand, she wore unshapely clothes on her body, seemingly crude, pale cloths attached together, hurting her beautiful impression. A young girl he had never seen before. That was how it was supposed to be. However, before that young girl's form, Subaru narrowed his eyes and rubbed his eyelids with the back of his hand. A gesture to seemingly recover the field of vision from haze, but her visible form didn't change. Even after looking at her yet again, she remained a young girl whom he was unacquainted with. He felt his memories throb faintly. Did you calm down a bit, Oni-san? Subaru, what's this place? No, who are you? Which one should I ask first? How covetous, Oni-san. But the quality of vomiting out the honest emotion of wanting to ask both is certainly not bad. We love covetous people, you see. Saying so, in response to the baffled Subaru, the young girl cleaved her lips sideways and smiled. Yes, she smiled, and that was the only befitting expression for describing that smile. The young girl was 13 to 14 years of age, but gave the impression of being even younger. Coupled with her well-featured physical appearance, unquestionably, a smile would suit the young girl, and yet, in Subaru's eyes, her smile seemed ominous. His instincts conjectured as though the soul of this young girl had belittled a great number of lives. And whilst Subaru shuddered, before him, the young girl reported. This place is, Lonesome White, the final destination of the soul. The cradle of Od Lagna. The Hall of Memories. Subaru, Hall of Memories. Yes, the Hall of Memories. And Subaru widened his eyes upon hearing the term unheard of. Whilst making a satisfied expression upon seeing Subaru's reaction, the young girl spoke. Whilst smiling, the malice which had taken the shape of a young girl vocalized. Louis, we are which cults in Archbishop representing Gluttony, Louis Arnab. Louis, pretty sure it'll be for a short while again, but please be caring, Oni-san. Chapter 60, What Smiles in the White World? The Hall of Memories and Louis Arnab. Yes, in front of the yellow-haired young girl who had responded to his query, Subaru remained silent. Within the unanticipated space of white, the happenstance meeting with the unanticipated young girl. And the know-it-all expression of the young girl set up an ambience as though she would be willing to talk about a multitude of things. Subaru, first of all, which cult or gluttony, sin Archbishop, what the hell do they even mean? Louis, Awatsu. At Subaru's remark, whilst he folded his arms and tilted his head, Louis put her hand on her mouth and smiled widely. If that moment alone was to be excluded, the solitary girl standing still within the illusion-like spectacle of sheer white was a location capable of being an artwork masterpiece, but the alarm of Subaru's instincts had been turbulently ringing since earlier. Subaru's survival instincts, which were highly likely to be of no avail, as a result of being brought up in the tranquil modern-day Japan. The reason why they were excited was a matter of course due to the heterogeneous aura of this young girl. Along with that, this was the result of being visited with unforeseen circumstances, so it was halfway something which could not have been helped, but pertaining to this existence wielding such know-it-all airs, the knowledge Subaru was endowed with was seemingly insufficient. It was also the case with what she had said just now, which cult, sin Archbishop, Hall of Memories and whatnot. Perchance, it may have been ordinary knowledge in this world, but unfortunately Subaru possessed no change of such ordinary general knowledge in his hand. Consequently, he found launching a progressive question to be difficult as well. Louis, the witch cult you see is, basically, a gathering of people loathed by this world. Subaru? Louis, even Oni-san must have at least heard the name Witch of Envy, no? The witch cult has a deep connection with that witch Sama. Well, you can think of it as something like followers. Subaru, then, what you said just now, refers to Sin Archbishop, huh? Sin and Archbishop had quite a strong ambience of running counter to each other as a combination, but was a naming which suited Subaru's sense down to a T. For upon hearing it even once, Subaru, it can be understood it's the name of a villain. Lewis, oh no, well no, no, as it's no, we're telling you no, even though it's no you know. Horizontally shaking her head in refusal, Lewis embraced her own petite body, in Subaru's line of sight. With no signs of the smile fading away from those lips, her refusal was merely an appearance as well. It was a young girl with her true feelings beyond perception. No, perhaps it should be said they were vague, with no point to grip on. Lewis, don't tease a tender young girl with such words, Oni-san. Even we get hurt, you know. Because we are the owner of a heart more fragile and easy to hurt than all others. Subaru, not convincing at all. Also, the way you use your first-person pronoun, is it cause it stuck to your character? Or is it a cool appeal like a one-man army? We or us, it's not stable, you know. Lewis, you don't have to worry about that. It's just that, there are too many selves, so it's getting airy as to which one is to be the subject, that's all. At this point, we're actually getting sick of it, you know. Whilst saying so, Lewis lightly oriented her gaze downwards, continuing her word saying but. Lewis, it can't be helped, isn't it? They are gifts from Onii-chan and Anai-sama after all, must earnestly accept them, or it'll be disqualification as a little sister. We're siblings so we must help each other out and cooperate, you know. Subaru, well, you're an adorable little sister, considerate of your elder brothers. I was the only child so I'm jealous. Lewis, is that so? Oni-san may have also gotten a little brother or little sister about now, no. Subaru, could you stop saying terrifying stuff? I don't want to imagine that. Regardless, his parents were an intimate married couple, so something like that actually meant no jest. If it's that father and mother of his, they would have another child upon Subaru's disappearance, no, inconceivable. Should Subaru disappear, they would continue searching until they find him, that's how Subaru's parents were. What must have his mother thought of her son, who did not even say any greetings when leaving? What must have his father felt, upon getting to know about that? He wished that Subaru's summoning into the different world was a reincarnation, is what his belief was. Must he make his parents taste the agony of searching for their disappeared son? Then Subaru wanted to say that he came to the different world after dying. That was much more comfortable. It had much more salvation. That is why. Lewis, we understand Oni-san. Subaru, hook. Don't joke around. He felt indignant for Lewis, who was peering at Subaru from below, carrying the hair which buried the floor in both of her arms. It was not as if she had spoken of his current uneasiness. It was merely that having his bitter expression observed, he had been told as if she understood Subaru's sentiments. Finding that to be terribly infuriating, Subaru shouted at Lewis, and turned his back towards her. Subaru, as if you know anything about me. Saying things as you please. Lewis, you're inexcusably apologetic towards Dad and Mom, aren't you? Without having said a single word of farewell, you're regretting how disobedient of a son you were. No, you were always regretting. Both now and earlier, isn't it? Yes, with the purport of being aware, whilst continuing the remarks of one showing to be a sympathizer, Lewis softly hugged Subaru's back. A small, petite frame. Subaru halted his breath and stiffened his body. Not because of having been nestled close to by the young girl. Because of the very content of the young girl's words. Those comments of one showing to be a sympathizer had unmistakably, however, guessed the end of Subaru's heart correctly. Lewis, why do we understand, you say? Isn't it obvious we'd understand? Because there's not a single person who knows about Oni-san as much as we or us do, after all. Subaru, don't touch me. Lewis, Lewis harbored a sour look on her lips at Subaru, who swung his arms, raised his breath and took distance. What the hell? Do females of unknown character in this world have no hesitation at all in having physical contact with unfamiliar men? Too overfamiliar. It was frightening to possibly abandon the heart weakened by the warmth of that body. Subaru, what's the deal with you? What do you want to say? Lewis, we just want Oni-san to be relieved, we're telling you. It's alright, it's alright. There's a proper full stop on your feelings for Dad and Mom. Even if it may be one-sided, it's with the intention of facing them. Your heart got relaxed, we're telling you. Pretense, you see. Whilst deriding, Lewis had the nails of her right hand stab into her left arm. With the note of scratching, with vigor one would flinch from pain by simply witnessing, she began wounding that thin, white arm. At Subaru, who knitted his eyebrows upon that deed, Lewis unraveled her frighteningly scarlet, long tongue. Lewis, pretense, is completely healthy. It makes it look as if there are no problems within one's heart at all. You're skilled at it, Oni-san, isn't it? It's sad that you're skilled at it, Oni-san, isn't it? Subaru distorted his lips at the speech which seemingly terribly abraded the interior of his chest. Now on he must abide by the alarm bell of his instinct, which way of ringing may undergo change should he go along with her anymore. Subaru, I don't get what you want to say. I don't get it, but it'll become an injury, so stop. Well then, let's play the catch of conversation. No beamers allowed. Let's keep in mind to only throw curveballs. Lewis, mutually? Subaru, mutually. Yeah, for example. Let's continue the conversation about sin archbishops from earlier. Without staying on board with Lewis's way, Subaru returned the topic to what it was just recently. If he got to know sin archbishop was sin archbishop literally, then he had some knowledge of the associativity between the word sin and gluttony. Subaru, if you are gluttony, then there must be 6 other similar people, no? Lewis, if Oni-chan and Ni-sama were also to be included, then that would make exactly 6, we guess? Ah, but it got reduced by 2 people recently, so there may be 4 people now. If only those 2 could just die quickly as well, you know. Subaru, if that's what you say, then your sense of comradeship seems to be pretty low. Lewis, it's obvious, you know. We may name ourselves as something like sin archbishops, but we are just a gathering of people loathed by this world anyway. Just the way of calling us is different, but we're the same as the witch after all. Saying so, Lewis flopped and knelt down at that spot. When she did that, she appeared as having herself sunken within hair of gold threads, an extremely peculiar ambience. Subaru scratched his head, settling his hips onto a position, making sure as to her hair did not get crushed underneath, and tilted his head, saying, which? Subaru, same as the witch you say? You mean same as the witch which seems to be believed as being excessively frightening? Lewis, as one would expect, the nature of the witch of envy is worse than even us, so we don't want to be lumped together, you know. The rest is the same. Both witch and sin archbishop are the same thing, which are just called differently. The good-for-nothings compatible with the witch factors are just called differently due to different eras and positions, that's all. Lewis, well, the present Oni-san has forgotten about witches and sin archbishops, and us anyways, so whichever one may be fine, you know. We get it, we do get it, we get it, you know, as we get it, but we got it, because we had gotten it. Subaru, shut up. Lewis, Mouthing off, intercepting the words assailing upon him like a wave, Subaru put his hand on his chin. Somehow or the other, it also felt like he was getting to hear things which were quite important. Though it was a speech Subaru couldn't make a single pinpoint at, it seemed he could remain without getting into the awkward situation of returning to Amelia, and the rest without reaping any harvest. However, Subaru pondering here was not due to the existence or non-existence of that achievement. Subaru was pondering here due to the unease he felt from Lewis's responses, which could be avoided no more. No, it was a sensation which ought to be labeled as one he was already familiar with. With that as the reason, if there was anything that struck his mind. Subaru, could it be, you're a lineage of gods? Lewis, lineage of gods, you say? Ah, is it this? Something like reincarnation into different worlds? Don't really get it, but we and that are unrelated. Certainly, this is a place which can feel weird though. Chuckling and mocking, with her yellow hair underneath her buttocks, Lewis turned her body around once at that very spot, and denoted the white world possessing nothing with her lightly fluttering hair. Lewis, this is a place just as how it appears. A place where everything disappears, hence, a place with nothing. We're standing here all alone, that's why we may seem like the guardian deity of this place, isn't it? Subaru, the cradle of Odi Lagna, was it? Including the name Hall of Memories as well, none of it got into my head whatsoever. Lewis, guess so. Basically, this is the place where souls are filtered. Subaru, filtering souls? At the phraseology difficult to be accustomed to, Subaru had question marks float within his mind. Filtering, in other words, had the same implication as saying sieving, but it was rare to hear it being utilized with regard to souls. However, Lewis, with a happy expression, pulled her knees towards herself and said yes, yes. Lewis, you use a dust cloth which had been used before once again after washing and drying it, no? The same goes for souls. By clearing the dirt stuck onto it, it is used once more when in a clear state again. Subaru, that, dirt stuck onto it. Does it mean memories or experiences and stuff? Lewis, if that's what you can understand, then let's keep it that way, alright? Oni-san, do as how you'd like. Distorting his cheeks at Lewis, who had her tongue out, Subaru turned his head around towards the environs. As ever, in the white space in the Hall of Memories, existed nothing novel to the eyes. Within the endless white world, any easy-to-understand exhibit was not present either. For argument's sake, if this place was indeed how Lewis spoke of it, then there could have been levitating disembodied souls, or the filtered memories or experiences rendered visible in some form. Lewis, it's not something so easy to comprehend, you know. Subaru, that god called Odi Lagna is pretty malicious, isn't it? Lewis, it's not an article so great as to be called God, that thing. That thing has nothing like such splendid ideology, after all. It's just a mechanism, you know. A mechanism for keeping the world from breaking is what it is. Subaru, a mechanism. Lewis, whether it's witch factors or divine protections or sword saints or witches, it considers nothing, you know. If there's something nice about Od Lagna, it's just that it's uninterested, equal, impartial, and favors nothing. Narrowing her eyes with seeming disinterest, Lewis interposed her own face in the space between her knees which she had pulled towards herself. Sidelong glancing at her, who had her cheeks curved by her white kneecaps, Subaru took a short inhale. She was a young girl who had continued conversing quite obediently till now. He could reckon that perhaps she had not spoken any seemingly false lies either. That is precisely why Subaru inhaled. Inhaling, exhaling, inhaling once more, and then he looked at her. And asked her. Subaru, the one to steal my memories of everything till yesterday, is it you? Lewis, yes so? The offender responded to Subaru's question, exceedingly promptly. With his doubt readily responded to, Subaru closed his eyes. He felt that he would not be denied much. She must have done something like that, that was why she had judged so much about him with the dialogue they had in this scant time, was how he felt. Lewis knew far too much. She was deeply, far too au fait with the emotions of Subaru's heart. Also including precisely that which the present Natsuki Subaru could never be aware of, Lewis Arneb was thoroughly informed regarding Natsuki Subaru. It was not something which could be falsely classified with words like it being a type of observation seldom seen, hence precisely why Subaru had gone ahead and inquired with complete honesty, and attained its affirmation. Mysteriously, what was welling up in his chest was not rage but understanding. In other words, Subaru, so the me of yesterday, did indeed come here as well, huh? Lewis, speaking strictly, the way of arrival was a bit different, you see. But well, the purpose was the same. The result was slightly different, that's all. But how amazing. How wonderful. After how many times did you manage to come here? Lewis, hey, answer, Oni-I-san. We answered, you know. After having gotten eaten by us, what kind of Oni-I-san are you, Oni-I-san? Upon that question of Lewis's, chills ran through the muscles around Subaru's spine. Her eyes' questions were clearly in vain of one aware of the conviction of return by death. No, it was a matter of course. It was but a matter of course. If she had stolen the memories of Natsuki Subaru, and had the ability to freely read those memories, then there was nothing odd about her knowing of return by death. Return by death was not a power wielded only by the Subaru, who had lost his memories, but must have unquestionably been the power which Natsuki Subaru wielded prior to losing his memories. Certainly, Natsuki Subaru had made free use of that power, and sailed across a great number of difficult situations. The result of that was the trust he gained from Amelia, Beatrice, his comrades, the testimony of cheat equals foul as it were. Subaru did not intend to find faults in that. Whether it be cheating or foul play, if in a setting where someone's life was on the line, there mustn't be any hesitation in utilizing it. The choice Natsuki Subaru made was correct. That is why Subaru must do the same now, when Natsuki Subaru was absent. And, accepting their being worth in its application, he gulped down the power of return by death. However, contrary to that resolve, there existed a queer uneasiness, anxiety, in the interior of Subaru's chest. Lewis Arneb was infringing upon that difficult-to-repel fear, that taboo. That was Lewis, about how nobody must get to know. If it's about that, then it's already too late, Oni-I-san. Us meeting Oni-I-san happened yesterday, no? Lewis, the rule about how nobody must get to know, has already been broken way long time back. But happenings of the Hall of Memories don't leak outside easily. That's why the scary witch won't make a move. Quickly, with her limbs set on the floor, Lewis drew her face closer to Subaru, who was sitting cross-legged. She expressed a bewitching smile unsuited to her age, whilst having her scarlet tongue peek out. Lewis, hey, Oni-I-san. Which time is this? At that tone of voice which seemed as if her tongue was directly pecking at his brain, Subaru tasted a numbing pain. And then, having his tongue and throat tremble faintly. Subaru, it's the 5th time. Lewis, Sue. Amazing, how amazing, so amazing, it's amazing, isn't it amazing, we're telling you it's amazing, because it is amazing that we admire and yearn for it. Gluttonous drinking Sue. Gluttony Sue. Subaru, ga hook. Lewis, we irresistibly want to taste Oni-I-san so much, that our stomach would be filled to bursting. From our experiences, we think appetite and sexual desire are similar. Sexual desire in other words is love, right? In other words, Oni-I-san, we. Thrusting Subaru away, Lewis, who was in the position of riding a horseback, breathed out warm sighs with an aroused face. With blood rushing to her cheeks and eyes spellbound, Lewis had her tongue crawl on Subaru's neck lacking any hesitation. At the same pace, the words she tried to continue on to, his thoughts finally caught up to what they would be. Love you. His heart exploded, reminded of the words of love that fusilade upon Subaru countless times in the previous loop, wherein he had desired death under circumstances which took a hopeless turn. Subaru, let's see, you tiny damn sexologist hook. Lewis, ooh-hee. Opening his eyes, Subaru seized the nape of the young girl who was pressing him down, and at the same pace violently, coercively pushed her down onto the white floor. Exchanging their stances, this time it was Subaru in the position of riding a horseback atop her. A slender, light figure. The long yellow hair stretching out on the floor, like a golden bed she was lying sprawled upon, whilst Subaru kept a check on her neck and bared his canines, seemingly in a position of having pinned her down. Subaru, did you let your guard down? How unfortunate. In this position, I have an overwhelming advantage. If you don't want to get your neck strangled like this, my memories are to be. Lewis, returned, you say? You'll strangle the neck if they're not returned? Our neck, a feeble little girl's? With her neck arrested, in the state of having gotten the right over her life and death seized, Lewis gazed at Subaru, who was breathing roughly through his nose, and loosened her lips with the earlier excitement in her eyes not dimmed in the slightest. And from her loosened lips, she asked with an imitative voice which felt as if it were a curse. Lewis, is Oni-san really going to do something like that? Subaru, do you think I can't? Lewis, not really think, we actually know, isn't it? After all, look, it's such that the current us know more about Oni-san than Oni-san himself anyway. Whilst saying so, Lewis repeatedly nudged her cheeks with the index fingers of both her hands, and tilted her head as if provoking. Holding his breath at that attitude of hers, Subaru looked down onto his right hand which had grasped Lewis's neck. Should Subaru want to show his seriousness a bit, all he had to do was to pour strength into his arm. Should he show his seriousness, Lewis would certainly reconsider her ideas as well. Were he to be asked whether he would kill her, that would certainly be difficult. Arduous. Even for a just cause, like being a suicide assistant, Subaru was unable to smash consciousness out of his comrade's mind with a piece of rubble. So even if he knew it was an enemy of his, powerfully strangling the neck of the young girl before his eyes was. No, at least strangling he was capable of. It was a necessity. He called back to Amelia, Beatrice, Ram, Maylie, Julius, Echidna, Shala, Patrash, everyone in his mind, and. Lewis, strength has faded away from your arms, hasn't it, Oni-san? Lewis, we really had no intention of resisting, you know? After all, over here we are just as how it seems, or a weak young girl. Unlike Oni-chan or Ni-sama, we must take the form of eaten people, or we can't haul out any powers, isn't it? With the finger that had been nudging her own cheek, Lewis nudged Subaru's right hand which was gripping to Lewis's neck. With that frail strength, Subaru's palm let go of her neck far too swiftly. Subaru, shit. Hook. Lewis, don't feel down anymore, Oni-san. It was a good performance, a good performance. After all, to be honest. It's such that we didn't even think that Oni-san would come back here. Subaru, do you think that's any good consolation? Continuing to remain in the push-down stance, Lewis, who was lying sprawled on the floor, made an expression suggesting already being over with the worst. Destroying that expression, he searched for words in order to convey his demands, but was unable to find anything precise. That is why, looking at Subaru, who ended up making an utterance like that of a poor loser, Lewis raised her voice saying a ha-ha similar to observing fish swimming inside an aquarium. Lewis, but well, it turned out nicely, did it not? If something like the memories of Natsuki Subaru are regained, the current Oni-san will end up dying is what that means anyway, stay without doing something idiotic like committing suicide, you know. Subaru what? Lewis, huh, what's with that weird reaction? It can't be, did you not notice? If memories return, the current self will get overwritten, and its existence will get terminated. That's the same as dying, no? Subaru was petrified at that attitude of Lewis's, as if she were asked the solution to an obvious riddle. He shall die. He shall disappear, vanish. So was he distinctly told. So he was told, upon the return of the memories of Natsuki Subaru, the consciousness, the memories of the Subaru present right here right now shall get overwritten and will disappear, vanish. Should that not be named as death, what else should it be? Lewis, right now, Natsuki Subaru is dead, isn't it? He's nowhere, after all. But if Natsuki Subaru comes back, this time it'll be Oni-san who will die, isn't it? He won't be able to go anywhere, after all. Lewis. You know, does Natsuki Subaru really have the worth to go so far for and be recovered at? Oni-san must also be capable of doing the same things, no? Oni-san must have also come to love the people around him in the same way, isn't that right? The people around too will also come to love Oni-san the same way. What's so wrong with that? Subaru, what's so wrong with that? Should that be asked, then certainly there was nothing wrong with it. Certainly there was nothing wrong with either Natsuki Subaru or Natsuki Subaru. Subaru was a human possessing numerous flaws. Filled with flaws such that he would be repulsed by himself. Should he be asked whom he hated the most in this world, he would answer it was himself with not an instant's worth of faltering. That was how hopeless, insufficient Natsuki Subaru was. However, there present were no errors in Subaru pertaining to this particular question. What was present was merely the hopeless truth, a single spot of sunshine. Subaru, to Emilia-chan and the others, I wanted to return Natsuki Subaru back. That is why he intended to prepare resolve within himself that should he find a chance to recover memories, he shall take it without any hesitation. However, he had completely averted his eyes away from the disappearance of his own existence. Speaking of sheer conveniences, the two memories blending together, or some part of Natsuki Subaru being left within the current Subaru, he had thought if something like that could not happen, he had thought if it could all not be settled in a nice shape of some sort, he had expected the occurrence of a miracle of this kind. Subaru's such vacillating expectations were. Lewis, what would it be like? Never seen a person who had their memories returned before, so we have no idea. Lewis unveiled her teeth, as though ridiculing Subaru's conflict, with the expression in her eyes being that of a cat tormenting a mouse. The offender who heist these memories, even irresponsibly, was pleased to say that she knew nothing of what would happen thereafter. That was not a lie, but certainly the truth. Louis Arneb would never do something as to return what she had stolen away from others back to the original proprietor. That is why she truly held no idea what would happen to Natsuki Subaru as a consequence of having the memories returned. Louis, Oni-san, you got this life by being born and everything, it won't do if you don't celebrate it. That irresponsible usurper continued to gaze intently at Subaru's face from an inch-worth distance. Louis, as a result of us eating the memories of Natsuki Subaru, Oni-san is here. In other words, we are something like Oni-san's birth parent, isn't that right? To try and choose the option of having yourself die in front of that parent, isn't that what's called lack of filial piety, Oni-san? Subaru, something so absurd is. Hook. Louis, memories are what shape people, Oni-san. Becoming deeper, becoming colder, Louis erased all expression, and said only those brief words with a serious tone. Without thinking, Subaru inhaled at the acuity of those words, and quietened. Alongside, he also felt that this had not been the first time he heard those words. If not mistaken, then that resonance, those words, immediately before facing the second death as well had been. Louis, the present Oni-san, has relationships which the present Oni-san has created. Why don't you try living again anew, facing forward? We think that's also an option, you know. Louis, on top of that, don't know how we should feel saying this, but Natsuki Subaru didn't really feel like the image of an ideal man, you know. Closing one of her eyes, Louis smited the emotions of Subaru's heart with an expression, as if finding what she was going to say to be difficult. All the more, she linked her arms in front of her chest while remaining in the stance of Subaru riding a horseback atop her, and gazed into his dark pupils with eyes like that of a dreaming maiden. Louis, pitiable Emilia. A miserable girl who was avoided by everyone, just because of having her birth being the same as the former witch. Ah, how kind must myself be, to still remain by her side. Subaru, wah. Louis, weak, fragile Beatrice. Without anyone to rely on, a lonely girl who spent a time of solitude all by herself. Myself must pull her hand through the dark and dangerous path. Before the staggered Subaru, what Louis sonorously continued articulating were the names of two young girls who prayed for Subaru's safety and showed him a path, and terribly elliptical mental images of them. Even Subaru understood whose mental images they were, and what Louis intended to express. Though he understood, that was. Louis, devoted and seeks to dedicate gratuitous love, rem. Foolish and beautiful, how pure. Surely she is an incomplete being who gains the true feeling of living by becoming frantic for the sake of someone else, other than herself. Precisely that, must be led by the existence known as I. Subaru, what are you? What are you trying to do? Louis, speaking for what Natsuki Subaru used to think, we're telling you. Wanting a sense of superiority. Not thinking it was for the sake of someone else all of the time, you know. Flocking only convenient people around, getting drunk on the pleasant feeling of offering a hand. Not even throwing any feed to a dog which won't get emotionally attached. Keeping those away. Louis, do you really intend to hand yourself over to that Natsuki Subaru? The question, having overlapped twice. That was a requisition of confession for Natsuki Subaru by Louis, by gluttony. To speak his true feelings, that is what Louis demanded of Subaru. Whether he did want to die, whether he did not want to die, if he, for the argument's sake, were to die, whether would it be for the sake of someone like that? No, Subaru's death would not be for the sake of Natsuki Subaru. No, from the very beginning, Subaru did not have the intent to die. Even if he thought of returning Natsuki Subaru back to Emilia and the others, for it to mean his own death. No, could he, however, truly trust Natsuki Subaru? At the very least, Natsuki Subaru had killed Meili, and even carved incomprehensible characters on the wall. Louis, well, what do you want to do, Oni-san? Subaru, hook. Whilst saying so, Lewis grasped Subaru's hands with her slender arms and fastened them to her own neck. Once again, though this time through her own incitement, Lewis's slim neck lay vulnerable to Subaru's arms. Should he pour strength in both of his arms, it will surely fracture easily. If not, the conclusion will get established. However, to not do that meant either choosing to kill Natsuki Subaru, or the same happening to himself. At the very least, that was what Lewis was saying. For the argument's sake, for just the argument's sake, if he broke this slim neck, and if Natsuki Subaru was to return and the present Subaru was to disappear, would he not be able to witness even the fruits of his actions? If that's the case, then what was the meaning of Subaru mustering up meager courage and undertaking action here? Lewis, well. Lewis, what? What will you do? What is it that you'll do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do, huh? What do you want to do? What do you want to do it like? Whatever you do, it's all right, you know? Whatever it ends up as, we'll forgive you. As though tormenting him, as though ridiculing him, as though laying a curse upon him, Lewis's words struck Subaru's eardrums. So did Louis Arneb, so did gluttony, so did the sin archbishop, so did the slim young girl, so did the abominable existence, so did his birth parent. The choice of what he shall do with Natsuki Subaru drew near Natsuki Subaru. Lewis, well. Well. Lewis, what do you want to do? Oni-san. End of chapters 59 and 60. What smiles in the white world?